literally from that day forward, I went from a victim mindset to a victor mindset. And one of the things we're going to talk about is living a reliant life versus a reliable life. And that transition of what occurred on that day, even though it was a couple years that led up to it, was the single moment that everything completely launched in a different direction for me. Not that it wasn't hard for the next couple of years, believe me, but the path, the climb back, the comeback had started. And I know so many people, now that I've been through that and I have a life that everybody would just, dream about at this point in my life. But I know so many people that have had a circumstance like mine or another devastating event happens in their life, and they literally become a victim to it for the rest of their life. And the lesson that I just want everybody to, understand is no matter how difficult, no matter how far down you are, no matter how depressed, whatever it is, there's always, if you look down to the end of that tunnel, there's always a glimmer of light. And you gotta find it.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 9 of Run with the Cheetahs, your guide to an extraordinary life. My name is Russell Anderson, and I'm thrilled to be here today with you. We've got a very special treat today. We've got some fabulous content, but in addition to having myself and the author, Jerry, we've also got a Cheetah Jr. We've actually got the son of Jerry, Justin Freishtat. And, I'm just going to give you a couple of words on Justin. First off, the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree, if you know what I mean. This is a young man, one of the most impressive young men that I've met in years and years and years. He's smart, savvy, business sharp. You're going to love what all he has to say. I'm looking forward to bringing him in a little bit. So, guys, let me bring both of you in here just for a little bit to say hello. Come on in here. Jerry, what you got this morning?
Hey, everything's looking great over here, Russell. Looking forward to this is going to be an episode of, I guess the best way to describe it is people learning hard lessons, and we're gonna walk you through that and just show you that you can survive anything.
Justin, you got anything you want to say to get started here this morning?
Yeah, it's great to be here. Number one, thanks for having me on, fellas, and little bit of jet lag here getting back from Australia, but it's a blessing to, even in good times, hard times, just to be living. So I think that's part of the stuff we're going to get into today.
Well, we're glad you're here with us. So, guys, here's the story. Here's what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about tough times. We're going to be talking about challenges. We're going to be talking about adversity. It's going to be in everybody's life. At some point, we're all going to deal with some tough stuff. I don't care how good the TikTok reel looks. We're all going to be dealing with some tough stuff. And the question becomes, what do we do with this tough stuff? How do we move through this tough stuff? What do we learn from this tough stuff? And I know that Jerry's going to share a story today, and I know that Justin's going to share a couple of stories today that talk about finding yourself in the middle of some real tough stuff. And what do you do with it? How do you move through it? How do you get through it? What do you learn from it? Because it's not a matter of what happens to you. It's what you do with it and what you do after it. Let's not pretend that life is sweet and innocent all the time. There's some real tough stuff going on out there. I know some people myself right now dealing with the death of a loved one, dealing with infidelity, dealing with a serious illness, dealing with accidents, business partner betrayal, There's no getting around it. There's a lot of tough stuff out there. People are dealing with it all the time. And we have compassion for that. We have compassion for that. But we've got to talk about, what do we do with it? How do we deal with it? How do we move through it? And what can we learn from it and move on? Jerry, chapter 13 of your book, From Victim to Victor. It's a fantastic chapter. I read it again myself a couple of times before today. It's got some great, great stuff in it. I know we're going to cover a lot of it today, but the bottom line here is that victimhood is understandable, but it's not sustainable. And your line, you've got 2 lines out of your book, which I believe one of them should be tattooed on one wrist and the other on the other one. But the one for today is, the comeback is always greater than the setback. And that is going to be the mantra for today, is it not? Why don't you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, bottom line is, do you become, a permanent victim to your circumstances, or is it just a lesson along the way? And, I've learned through many hard and difficult lessons that nothing is all encompassing and no defeat is a final defeat. You may lose lots of battles along the way. You may continue, but you have to continue to fight the war. I mean, losing periodically and having setbacks, all of that is normal. And a lot of it sometimes is self-inflicted, and, other times it's inflicted upon you, but if you surrender, there's nothing left to live but a life of regret. And, also, if you don't defeat the moment and self-pity becomes the flavor of the day, you'll be doomed to a life of victimization. And just because I've seen the worst of this, and I've had people literally that I've lost over these issues, in extreme circumstances, you're one step away from stepping over that ledge. And I was there once, which I'm going to tell you about in a little bit. But the trigger to come back is to restart the climb from wherever you landed, regardless. Again, if it's self-inflicted or bestowed upon you, circumstances happen. Sometimes it's totally out of your control. So my personal comebacks have always exceeded my setbacks. Small ones, really bad ones, it doesn't matter. As long as, you're willing to, face difficult and extreme situations. And that's basically, it's what led me, to the life, an extraordinary life that I earned and possess today. I can move into my story here if you want to go on right into that.
Well, I tell you, I read your chapter. As I said, I read your chapter once again. I know that this particular story is about divorce. And, divorce is something that an awful lot of people, including myself, can relate to. So I think it's a story for a lot of people, and there's a lot of good lessons in it. So we'd love to hear it. Please share it, and we'll try and see what lessons we can gain from it.
Yeah, Justin, my son, with us today, he was, I think about 12, 13 years old when all this started. And I had 3 other small children. And, I'm not, there's no point in getting into the he said, she said, or any of the circumstances which led up to the situation. Because we're talking about resolution. When something really bad happens to you, what are you going to do about it? And so, my relationship, with my ex-wife, really started to deteriorate over many years. And it wasn't really something that all of a sudden you wake up one day and, it's over with. But, my entire life up to that point, there was nothing. I was always like this work ethic guy, and I could basically fix anything. And this was the first time in my life where she was done. I mean, years of effort. I mean, everything you can imagine, therapist, whatever, I was 100% going to fix this problem, right? And but little did I know that it was unfixable. And that's another lesson for people, that sometimes things just, you have to let it go. Some things just can't be fixed. And that was the situation I was faced with. And the crisis for me was, as I said, I had 4 young children, and nobody in my family had been divorced. And I was faced with the concept of not being able to raise my children full time, which was just, I mean, it was so crushing to me, like being a father and a dad, and I was highly involved in all my kids' lives and everything else. I just could not, deal with that. I mean, and so as time went by and the reality of the situation set in, um, I went down a really bad rabbit hole, and I was physically ill. I mean, I lost 40 pounds, couldn't sleep,
Mm.
couldn't eat. I mean, it was just total devastation. And so yeah, as time went by, um, I remember at one point things got so bad. I mean, and this is just how, one thing that I want to point out to everybody is that when you're in a mindset of desperation, you don't have rational thoughts. And somehow you have to be able to catch yourself
Mm.
before something really bad happens. And so for me, um, I got to a point where I actually thought my kids would be better off without me. And
Mm.
it was, there were a couple months in there where I really didn't think I was going to make it. And I just, kept, trying to get through it day by day by day. And got to a point where a friend of mine said, you should start dating. And that was like the last thing on my mind. I was like, I literally couldn't even get out of bed, more or less, go out on a date. And but sure enough, I did start doing that, and a little glimmer of hope came my way. I had a lot of success with dating, and I found out, you know what, you're maybe you're not that total piece of shit that you've been made to feel the last 5 years.
Ah.
And I found out that people liked me, and it gave me just a little spark of getting a sense of self-worth back. It wasn't the end of all things, and it wasn't the bottom for me. But it did taking action, which we've talked about in several episodes. Taking that action was one of the things that launched me in the right direction. And so as time went by, when all this was going on, I had recently sold my first. Well, it was actually my second company. Sold my second company. So I was in a position where I wasn't working, didn't have a business, and there was a raging battle going on with the custody of the kids. My divorce was about as ugly as it gets, and financially, we were driving each other into ruin. When I sold my company, it was the first time we were multimillionaires. The world, it was like, I felt like I made it. And as we talked about in other episodes, also, once you've had that feeling of you've made it, that's the beginning of the end. And that's exactly what happened here. So, we're bleeding our assets, and we had no income. And I turned around, and about a year and a half into the entire thing, I was broke. I literally went from, being a multimillionaire to, I had about just under $100,000 in an IRA account. That was it. I had to borrow money from my dad to, keep up the child support and keep things going. And,
Mm.
I again, that feeling of desperation, what am I going to do? because the hardest time to step up and execute is when you're in a victim mindset. So
Yes.
that's the most difficult time to try to make, go get a job or, whatever. You're sitting there just depressed, laying in bed all day. And well, what happened was I had met a girl, and our relationship kicked off. That was a real spark for me. But on 9/11, the morning of 9/11, I'm laying in bed, again, depressed, can't, feeling, this whole just completely feeling sorry for myself, total victim, and I'm watching, and Mark King, I watch CNBC, because I'm big financial guy. And, that first plane hit the building, and it's like, oh my God, what's going on here? And then once the second plane hit the building, the whole country realized, this is, serious attack. And then it was not shortly after that, the plane hit the Pentagon. Well, I live just outside of Washington, D.C., and I knew all my kids, were at, at school. And so I got in the car to go get the kids. And this is just a terrible, terrible thing. But I got halfway there and realized if I picked up the kids, it would be in violation of my visitation agreement. And I was fearful that, I could be arrested or, whatever, put in jail, whatever. And so I went back home and I was thinking, well, I'm sure my ex-wife will get the kids, everything will be fine. And we weren't communicating at the time. And so I went home and I sat there for like another hour. And as things evolved and the reality of the devastation of what happened on 9/11 kicked in, I got in the car to go get the kids again. And I actually drove all the way to the elementary school. That's where my two youngest ones were. And when I got there, I got in the parking lot. And again, I said, you know what, if I go get these kids, I'm creating one of the, I literally could end up in jail, right? So I went back home again. Well, I found out at the end of the day that my kids were one of the only, kids that weren't picked up. And later that night, I was so devastated. And it was not only that experience, it was the whole 9/11 experience. And I woke up the next day and basically said, I just can't do this anymore, in a positive way. And decided, I've always been a great dad, and decided that that's what I was going to be. I recognized that the woman I was dating, was very special, sent to me from heaven. And I gathered myself up and decided I need to rebuild. And I've always known how to build businesses, always known how to make money. And I went literally from that day forward, I went from a victim mindset to a victor mindset. And one of the things we're going to talk about is living a reliant life versus a reliable life. And that transition of what occurred on that day, even though it was a couple years that led up to it, was the single moment that everything completely launched in a different direction for me. Not that it wasn't hard for the next couple of years, believe me, but the path the climb back, the comeback had started. And I know so many people, now that I've been through that and I have a life that everybody would just, dream about at this point in my life. But I know so many people that have had a circumstance like mine or another devastating event happens in their life, and they literally become a victim to it for the rest of their life. And the lesson that I just want everybody to, understand is no matter how difficult, no matter how far down you are, no matter how depressed, whatever it is, there's always, if you look down to the end of that tunnel, there's always a glimmer of light, and you got to find it. And that was the thing that changed everything for me. And I always tell, everybody, and, and Justin knows this as well, the worst thing that ever happened to me turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Jerry, thank you for your honesty. Thank you for your candor. It's quite a story. And I want to bring Justin in here just for a second. Justin, have you heard that story before, Justin?
I have. It doesn't make it any easier to listen to.
I'll bet. I didn't know, I didn't know whether you would have heard all of that or not. I know, listen, I have a lot of, my wife was divorced. I'm divorced. There's a lot of divorce stories, but not all of the backstories get told to the children. That's why I asked that, whether or not you had heard that before. You have your own input to add on this. Jerry, again, let me say thank you. Thank you very much for your heartfelt story.
And one more thing I want to add to this, because, at the time, to me, everything's relative to your environment and your circumstances. And it's very important to understand that compared to other atrocities and other things that could have happened to me in my life, this was really not at the level of somebody who spent, 3 years starving in the Holocaust, someone that lost a child, so I don't want to discount how I felt in that period of desperation and despair, because it was real. And as I said, I was physically ill for 6 months. But it's important to recognize that no matter how bad most of our circumstances are, there's things way, way worse out there.
Jerry, I have a dear friend who has lost a child to suicide here in the past year. I don't even know what to say to her. I don't know how to be consoling. I don't even know how to listen properly. It's such a devastating experience for somebody. Yep. Adversity is out there. People have problems. There's a lot of people with a lot of problems and a lot of challenges. And what we're here today to talk about is, we all got them. How are we going to deal with them? One of the questions I have for you, Jerry, is, here you are a cheetah. I mean, you're cheetah number one right now. You've got the right mindset, but how long did you languish in that despair of that divorce?
That was approximately the total time from where I realized there was something really, really wrong, and that you get that feeling in your gut that doesn't go away. To getting out of that was about a 2-year window. 2-year window. Yep.
And, there's not an answer to what I'm getting ready to ask, but, the question becomes for people who are going through very difficult situations and they realize they're in a tough situation. They don't want their victimhood to turn into identity. How long should it or could it take for them to flip that switch? We're going to talk more about that in just a little bit. Let me get, and you're reliable to reliant, or excuse me, it's the other way. You're reliant to reliable conversation. I want to make sure we get into it a little bit. Those are not terms I'm real familiar with. That's a concept I'm not too familiar with. I've read it in your book. I know where you're going with that. I hope we can get back to that here in a little bit. But Justin, I got to bring you back. I got to bring you in, my friend. Now I've known you since you played hockey. Okay, when was that? When was that you were playing hockey?
I think right around the time I learned how to walk was about the same time I was putting on skates. So it was a long time.
Because Jerry and I have been such good friends for a long time. We would go to lunch and I would always want to catch up on all the kids, always want to catch up. And I remember the hockey stories, that was fantastic. But Justin, talk to us about Jerry's story. And then you have a perspective you also want to share on this.
Yeah. One of the things I was just thinking about listening to what you said is you almost want to let yourself off the hook for the degree of trauma that you felt, because someone else always has it worse. And while that's a good perspective for the bounce back, it's not good for the healing and acceptance of these traumas and emotions, because it's like the first time a girl breaks up with you when you're a teenager could be as traumatic as losing a child, right? It's to the degree of what you've experienced is the trauma you will feel. So I think it's important to validate these feelings of the things we go through. And one of the things I've realized is we're big personal development guys. This is what's got us the success and the grit and the grind. But it also prevents you from dealing with and handling the human aspects that you're going to feel and go through anyways. And doing the work despite ignoring it, all these things I've found is not productive in terms of really moving back better on the next round of what you went through. So it's just one of the things that I want to talk about is just you need to do this other side of personal development, which is the healing aspect that nobody really likes to do in our entrepreneurship circle. It's just go hard, ignore your feelings, all this stuff. So I just think it's an important thing to do both sides of this personal development, so that when you do come back, you come back better with a different level of grace for yourself and what you went through, if that makes any sense.
Grace is a wonderful word. Compassion, grace, a wonderful word. Please keep going.
Yeah, it's what I'm dealing with right now. I think because what I went through as a child, this entire story, it was the chip on my shoulder for why I became successful. I was angry, and you need a certain element of that to produce. You need some sort of reason that you're becoming the superhero or whatever in your life. So there's that. But because I didn't handle those wounds and I ignored them and buried them, I have now found myself at about the same age that you went through this, Dad, going through something very similar. And when you set out to create a life that's better than what you got to see, because I do believe that your job in a way as a child is to learn from your parents. They're doing the best they could with their journey. You get to live through that vicariously. It's like, okay, you learn from that and do it better. And to find myself in a similar situation, losing a large chunk of my net worth, business is falling apart, divorce, it's all happening at the same time, the way, your whole life kind of crumbled down. I'm realizing because I didn't handle the trauma side and I just buried it, I think that's a lot of why I'm here right now. So, the past 3 years, I've been going through hell, absolute hell. And I've been handling it a little bit differently. And I think that's why when I can kind of compare and contrast, do I have the depressed days in bed? A lot. But I feel like I've been able to sustain and not let it completely crash, because I am working on the acceptance and the trauma side of everything that happened. So it doesn't make it any easier. I do feel completely stuck, leaving my, I'm not operating at the same capacity, vibration, energy, all these things, understanding it to why it takes a while to get out of these gigantic life slumps. But I am still living. And one of the things I've been doing is taking a break from the absolute grind in terms of, a decade plus of doing nothing but working and building. When you start from zero, you have to do these things. I'm not saying you shouldn't, but I don't know if that would be the best use of my time at this phase of my life. So I've been doing a lot of traveling. I've been living a lot. And there's this guilt on me of like, well, you're not working as hard as you could. And it's very mentally difficult and interesting to balance the work ethic in you, the potential you have, and to say, it's okay if I just take a couple months to just let this pain subside, to just go experience some of the world. And that's what I've been doing. But it's incredibly mentally difficult, but I do think it's for what I've been going through, and we can get into all of it. I'm not sure I could be doing much better in that situation.
That's really an interesting take on it. I love that. I mean, but a tough call. You're right. I can imagine. I know how hard of a worker you are. I know how industrious you are. And I can imagine that saying, you know what? I'm going to back off just a little bit here, do some traveling. I just can imagine how that's got to be a challenge. Got to be a challenge for you.
Yeah. And if I'm going to have new perspectives, if I'm going to not make the same mistakes, if I'm going to understand myself better and, the next relationship I want, you're going to have to go have new experiences, do different things instead of, the tunnel vision of how we form our lives because of the trauma we all go through as children. It's something that I don't think most people ever work on. And then at the end of their lives, they probably look back and just, I was miserable through the whole process. I think we're all trying to figure out how to just enjoy the next 24 hours in front of us. And it's the most difficult thing to do in life.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. And, Russell, I just want to comment on, this whole thing, because we mentioned it in another episode about the whole forgive and forget thing, about, how to move on. And, a lot of that applies in religion and things like that. And, and I think I mentioned in that episode that, you can forgive, but biologically you don't forget. And you just saw it in my emotion and trying to tell that story, which was from, a couple of decades ago, that emotion and negativity is programmed in my brain. I could barely get through it. Right. So the key for me, and and this is something that I've mentioned to Justin before as well, is basically you overwrite it. Okay. It's always going to be there. It's occasionally going to surface like it just did for me in this podcast. Okay. But I've overwritten so much positive into my life, in my education, my relationships, every aspect, my marriage, being a father, whatever it is. I have so many positive things going that very rarely do those other negativity things ever surface like they did today. And it was just because I went and talked about it, right? So, it's something that people should understand, that if you don't move on and you don't grow and you don't learn and you don't expand and you don't achieve, you're going to be stuck with what you wrote in that previous chapter.
Jerry, I'm so glad you brought this up, because that exact story of yours came to mind when I was preparing for today's episode. I remember you saying that you can forgive, but biologically you do not forget. And that is so true. And we need for people to know that. We need for people to know that they can work to overcome their challenge, and they can grow tremendously from that. But it's almost impossible for it to be completely obliterated from your past. And it's going to resurface every now and then, and you just have to grow beyond it. I'm really glad you brought that up again. That's tough, tough, tough stuff, but it's real. It's the real thing. Wow. Well, Justin, do you want to tell us, it sounds like you've had a couple of tough 3 years, and how do you deal with setbacks and challenges that I know you're having in your life currently?
It's been very interesting because, again, it's all the perspective of what you've been through to this point is going to be the degree that you can handle. It's just that simple. And I remember when we were building Heartland Foods, making the cold calls, running the leads, working 12, 14 hours a day. These were very difficult things that were good things that were, we're having incremental progress. We're making more money. And it was equally as stressful because that was to the degree of difficulty I had been through. So you fast forward 10 plus years and, we have our blow off top of success. We sell the business. Like it's this pinnacle moment that you work for and it's time for the next chapter. And it's been, in hindsight, I thought it was such a difficult grind, the building side of it. And like what we did was so hard and all the challenges you work through in business and all the setbacks, all these things. And then you get to the end of that and you look back now that you've been through something that's actually catastrophic and go, wow, it was just slow incremental progress. That's what winning looks like. And I didn't even realize it when I was going through it. So on the back end of that, you lose your identity and it's okay. I got to reinvent myself. What am I going to do? And I saw the next generation ahead of me, all the young kids were building brands online and these things I hadn't done that it's looked like that's where the future was going. And I saw people like Grant Cardone, in their 50s and 60s who weren't making an excuse on age and they were just dominating social media. So I felt too old for it. And I was like, okay, I've got to dive into this. It's the most important thing I've ever done was to start building my personal brand. And it's actually one of the main things that's got me through the most difficult time of my life. And I'll tell you why. So I started building this brand. I thought I was going to do a health coaching company. I did one thing my whole career for more than 10 years. And then now looking back the last 3 years, I've done like 5, 10 things. So, I launched this coaching company. It has some success. I'm back to a 6-figure income using the internet instead of, knocking doors and grinding, driving 50,000 miles a year. That was a huge revelation. I was like, wow, there's a better way to get the same output, right? So now I'm figuring out ways to be more efficient. And that's when, I met my partners that we started our first hedge fund. I had always wanted to be in the money world, the finance world. And now I have this brand, this platform. I start going on podcasts. We're raising money. We built a $20 million business in 11 months.
Crazy.
And it took me 10 plus years to do 20 million in sales in the previous vehicle. So it was a huge moment of not just the success, the money and all that stuff. It was the figuring out of a better vehicle, how to transition and take your skills and get a lot more output for the same input. And I became obsessed with that kind of dynamic. So, we're ripping, we're growing, and I'm so excited. I can't do anything but work. And that's like the momentum. Once you catch the momentum, it's the greatest feeling there is, and you can't let your foot off the gas. That's a huge lesson from that. Unfortunately, sometimes the marketplace is going to serve you a black swan event you didn't see coming, and it's going to destroy you. That's what happened with our first fund. We ended up in just an anomaly situation where fraudulently someone stole $12 million from us. And, we had 60 investors. We had, a big chunk of my net worth was in there. So overnight, I'm in a situation for the first time where I lost my income. I lost almost half of the net worth. And I've got a new burn rate that I'm experiencing in my personal life because I'm finally hit that moment. And I wanted to give myself some things like live in the $3 million house and, the cars, the travel, the shopping. Like we were doing it all and it all went to zero overnight. So I had to, at the same time, unwind my personal life, deal with an absolute crisis. We're talking lawsuits start flying. So now your burn rate's going up. You've got no income. Everything is just evaporating. Your wife hates you for it. All of these things are happening all at the same time. My life completely crashed. And I moved into a small little condo. I'm like getting rid of cars, getting rid of everything, selling watches, like whatever you have to do to survive. And because I had built the personal brand and because I had done all the networking, there's just so many incredible people in my life that I could turn to. And I think that's what saved me from completely spiraling into helplessness was I could swallow my pride and reach out to a friend who's got a high ticket offer and say, hey, can I come do sales for you? Or this guy over here, like, hey, I've done and managed with my salespeople like over 35 million in sales in this vertical. I can plug right into a direct sale. And that's what I did. And that's what kept the lights on for me while I was dealing with total destruction. I mean, investigated by the 3-letter agencies. Nothing like a knock on your door at 7 a.m. with a search warrant. Things that you would never think would happen in your life. And you literally did nothing wrong. It was just black swan events happen. So, I was able to at least, cover the bills, work in sales offers, manage sales teams, doing all this contract work while we're dealing with the lawsuits, all this stuff. And that, I guess that's in today's world, what I would say to anybody who's winning, your day is coming. I spent my entire life trying to learn from what happened to my parents and design my life for that not to happen, happened anyways. So if you do build a brand, if you do network your ass off in good times and you spend money when you're winning to go get in rooms with the right people, when your day comes and you're going through the worst periods of your life, you won't feel completely helpless. Like it hurts my ego to still be in the rooms with all these people doing incredible things.
Yeah, yes.
And if you look at my social media, you think I'm living this like incredible life. And guess what? I am because of my network, not because of where I am right now personally. And that's a huge lesson.
Well, Justin, the difference between those two, though, I'm not sure everybody could even handle that. Do you know what I'm saying? In other words, you're saying that your network saved you. I think a lot of people would run from that, that their image is now trashed, not you, you see that difference and your network has helped you. I think that is a fantastic lesson. I'm not sure everybody would react the same way. I applaud that.
It may look like that. That's kind of what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I like to get yourself out of bed to go use the network. It was the most difficult thing, way more difficult than anything I've ever done. Right. So you might cry in the car before the event. You might cry when you leave, but at least for whatever reason, was able to make myself do it and not even at a high functioning level, like at 10%. There were still so many things I just couldn't get up and go do. But because the network's so big, there's so much opportunity. I'm still in all the group chats. I'm still in at all the masterminds and I'm seeing it. It's almost like I'm being microdosed with, hey, go do it, go do it. There's opportunity here, there's opportunity there, there's winning everywhere. There's so much winning in my face that although it's incredibly depressing, it's like a momentary reminder that it's there whenever you're ready to get off your ass and go get it again.
Well, Justin, let me ask you this. When it's all crashing, when it's all crashing down around you, at what point are you able to say, no, I'm gonna turn this. I'm gonna pivot. I'm gonna look ahead. Well, how do you do that? What do you say?
I think it's kind of what Bill Ackman said when he lost $4 billion. It's a reel that went pretty viral. That I have saved that I come back to. I probably watched it 1,000 times. When you're looking up that,
I don't know it, so I'm looking forward to hearing this.
I'll send it to you. It's, same thing, right? Lost $4 billion, going through a divorce, Hulk things crashing down. Like, the only thing you can do is make small incremental progress every day. Yep. And if you look up at that mountaintop that you were on, you'll just be so paralyzed. And that's where my thinking has shifted about long-term goals and living for the future, like all of these things. You get into this kind of phase of life and you realize if I can just win the next 24 hours.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. You latch on to things that are meaningful to you. For me, it was my kids.
Yeah. And a lot of where I'm at is figuring that out. A lot of the constructs, a lot of the things that I believed in have been completely turned upside down. And I think that's where a lot of the healing part's really important because, I've never been someone that can enjoy a vacation. I've never, or these things in life because you're so focused on the outcomes of production and progress in your life. And I think you probably get to the end. And if you sacrifice too much living for that, unless this is such an identity thing, right? It's like, if you haven't seen the interview with Tony Robbins and Alex Hormozy, you got to watch it because a lot of people who achieve extreme success have the opposite problem. They don't know how to do anything except work really hard. It's
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
only thing that they want to do. And they're sitting there saying, like, why can't I enjoy all these normal things? Like, why don't I want to go see a sunset across the world somewhere? Like, why, and I've found in my identity is I can do the work, I can be disciplined, but I don't live for it. I do enjoy experiencing life in other ways.
That's
So,
wonderful. That's wonderful to be able to
Yeah.
say that.
Yeah, these crisis type events teach you that, the way Justin described it, $3 million house, the Lambo, all those things, it's nice. I like nice things. My wife likes nice things. But I can tell you with the experiences I've been through, which you only talked about my divorce today, but I've had several other significant setbacks in my life, that I don't know how to keep this as, this is going to sound so simple and so basic, but you know what? A cup of coffee with my wife by the fire. It's all I need.
I don't have a problem with that. I do not
Yep.
have a problem with that.
Yep.
No, good for you. Good for you. Well, let me ask you this. Now, by the way, I just have to share one quick divorce story of my own. I'm not going to go deep at all. This is just funny. So when I was having my first wife, when we were having trouble, we went to marriage counseling. I guess a lot of us do that. And we went separately. So she goes first. And then when I went in the next week to see the therapist handed me a book on how to get a divorce. Yeah, that was the guidance. That was the guidance I got. I love it. That's great. Well, Jerry, you talk about why do people languish? Well, you say men live lives of quiet desperation. Why do people languish and not pull themselves up, not make the pivot, not make the decision? Why is that? Why do people not do that?
It's what I call the gap. Like, again, Justin and I described, pretty major things that have happened in our lives. But I mean, whether you have something that's very traumatic, a devastating event in your life, the best way, I want to describe this is in my book, I have this chapter called The Ladder.
Yeah.
Where your life is like incremental, you're climbing a ladder rung by rung by rung. It's almost identical to the way a stock chart looks, like Apple Computer, greatest company there ever was. Okay. The stock goes up little bit. And then an event happens and it comes crashing down. Apple lost more than 30% of its value, I think 4 times, something like that. And they almost went out of business in the early years too. So what happens when you're climbing those rungs up, again, you're going against gravity, right? And when that event happens, you're in a free fall. Okay. And you have to, at some point, reach out and grab one of those rungs. It could be a third of the way down. It could be halfway down. It could be right near the bottom. But you got to grab one of those rungs. And at that point, you just start climbing again and you climb again. And every experience you have along the way, you fall less because you're ready to start climbing sooner. So what I call the gap is how long you're in that victimization mode. Like the first time for me with my divorce, as I said, it was like 2 years. After my divorce, about 5 years later, I was scammed out of about $1 million. I was kind of in the gap for maybe 3 months, right? You have to shorten that window of time of getting out of the victimized mentality because it's going to happen, right? And it happens in different degrees. But now, when something moderately bad happens, it wouldn't matter what it is, it could be just a, bad stock day or, whatever, something, it doesn't even affect me, right? Okay, because I know that I'm just going to just go start climbing again, right? So so those experiences are what you do with them, and you learn how to narrow the gap. And the more you learn to narrow the gap, the more of your life you spend in a place of contentment, peace of mind, and where, ultimately where you want to end up. Whereas if you don't narrow that gap and you become a victim and you stay there, you're going to live, again, it's a miserable existence.
Well, I love every bit of that. So, Justin, I'm going to throw back to you just for a second. So, with all that you're going through right now and the gap that Jerry's talking about, I can only imagine that your gaps that you might have to look at going forward are going to be pretty short-lived after what you've gone through.
Yeah, it's so interesting, right? Because I'm sitting here listening to this and I'm like, man, I think there's two different gaps here, and again, back to the grace thing. I'm like, I need to give myself some grace or I'm never going to gap up big. Because when I really look at the past 2 years dealing with the crisis, losing everything, everything, not just the hedge fund that went bad, but all of our personal real estate got hit really hard. Anybody that bought real estate in 22 is suffering. There's just so much compounding of just bad. But then that's what you focus on. I'm not sitting here looking at saying, okay, at the bottom of the, like when the whole hedge fund got destroyed, I looked at my partners, we're like, we got to fund these lawsuits. We got to do all this stuff. We built a brand new business from scratch, and, it wasn't the same size, but like we built $1 million business in less than a year. I got a W-2 over here at the same time, and we're managing the crisis. It's like, I don't think I've given myself enough grace for how much of a survivor I am.
Good for you. Good for you.
In the last year, that was 2 years ago we did that. And then like we had the marketing business churning this, past year. I got myself onto the board of a public company. I'm managing a new hedge fund, somehow scraping together, multi six-figure incomes again while managing the crisis. And then this year's the loss of the marriage. And it's like all happening at the same time. But I'm sitting here feeling horrifically mentally every day. But I'm surviving well and I'm traveling the world. It's like, how am I feeling so terribly? Again, it's because it's so impossible to not look at where you thought your life would be at X moment. And all the time and effort you put into building to a certain level, not just the business stuff, but like your life, your personal life, all of it, the death of the vision of your life, I think is what that mental thing is you go through in a period like this. So even if you are from the outside, it's like you want to, you sure, like we're putting it back together, you're surviving while you're suffering, all this, I can be really proud of that. I still have to go through the death of the vision of my life.
Sure.
Yep.
Sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's a great way of putting it, because a lot of people have to face that. And that's exactly what I faced. I had a vision, I had dream, a goal, and it was like the model of the way I was raised, the way my family was, and it was 100% thrown out the window. And you got to mourn that death and move on to start that new life, because you can have several new lives along the way with that whole thing. Yep.
Yeah.
So Jerry, let's talk about the people that are out there experiencing some real tough times right now who might be able to admit to themselves they're feeling a bit like a victim. Maybe they're using the language of life's not fair. We've talked about that before.
Yep.
But for whatever reason, they're down low. They're down in the dumps. They're feeling bad. Things are tough. We need to remind them, as you have said, that no one's coming to the rescue. They can be the architect of their future, correct?
Yeah. I mean, this goes into the kind of the next phase of this of, you have a choice of you can deny and justify, or you can accept and correct.
Look at that.
And,
that's great.
You have to, well, let me ask you this. What's easier, blaming others or blaming yourself? Right. And again, I know I use this word a lot, but it's so counterintuitive. Everything in life that seems like it's the easy path in general is the wrong path. Every bit about success is hard. And taking accountability and doing what I just said a minute ago, accepting and correcting, when something really bad happens and This goes for things in your control and out of your control. Something really bad happens that had nothing to do with you, but it affected you. You still have to accept it. And you just look at it in a broad picture, and what can I do to correct that moving forward? When you have that mindset, you're never going to be in the victim mentality, because when you take accountability for everything, you can't be a victim to anything. And it's just so important that you just can't deny and justify and lie to yourself all the time. And that's what people do. They just constantly lie to themselves about, why this happened, the world's against me, everything's negative, why am I put in these circumstances? And that mentality will get you nowhere. I mean, and jumping back to what Justin said here a minute ago, about this, the comeback always beats the setback. I see all the evidence in the world from all the experiences and everything I've been through. His next comeback is going to crush these setbacks.
My gosh. I can't.
He can't see it right now. Okay. He may have a little, like I said, you might see that little light at the end of the tunnel, but when it happens, and the reason I know it's going to happen is just because of his mindset.
Justin's huge.
He has a growth mindset. He's got a vision. And I already know of one thing he's working on that everybody needs to stay tuned about that's going to be huge. So, there's things that are going to come his way. And, and because of his mindset, there's that law of attraction. I have no doubt in my mind he's going to meet the person that's for him, in a relationship. So, there's the outlook, as hard as it is when you're in the depths of hell, you have to have that glimmer of light at the end of the tunnel. You just have to look for it. You got to seek it out. And sometimes, what's that country song? When you're running through hell, just keep on running. I mean, that's the best way I can describe it. You just got to keep going.
Wow. I don't know whether I want to go backwards on this or not, to tell you the truth. This has been so powerful. We've talked about some really tough times, and you two have shared amazing stories. Thank you. Thank you for your forthrightness in those stories and the challenges that you're dealing. But, I want to dumb it down just a little bit for a minute. Not all victimhood is about tragedy. People can become victims of what we would consider very modest things. People can be a victim. They're going to wait for things to calm down. Yeah, I'm going to take care of things when things calm down a little bit. That's victimhood.
Yep.
That's being a victim, That's just how I am. That's being a victim. That's being a victim. Over-explaining things as opposed to taking action and making things happen. I can relate to that one. I don't have time. I don't have time is a victim mentality. And that's new for me to hear that, but that's true. We all have the same time. Now, again, these are not the sort of tragic events that we've been talking about today. But if we're talking about being a victim, these are attitudes of victimhood. Would you all agree with that?
Certainly.
And
yeah, I mean, it's what you're describing now gets into the podcast we did about habits. When you have these negative recurring habits, we talked about Mark Manson's negative feedback loop. You just everything you described is caused from lack of a regimented disciplines, that you have a mindset that is flawed, is I guess the best way of putting it.
Well, super fixed, right? And this is why words are so important. If you say, I don't have time, you've now trained yourself for a belief, right? If I say, I don't really want to put in the time for that, now I can go look at, okay, well, am I just feeling that way? Like, progress can happen. Whereas if you use don'ts or absolutes, you're completely stuck and fixed, and there is no getting out of the victim.
But let's also note that being a victim has benefits. Being a victim has benefits. So people can say, it's not my fault. How dangerous is that? I mean, that's like, let's not get up on the horse and get out of here. It's not my fault, It avoids discomfort. People listen. You get sympathy and validation. People listen. People want to comfort you. I mean, being a victim can have some benefits. So, I mean, it's easy to understand how some people will languish in that area. But Justin, let me ask you this. If we're talking to somebody out there listening today who's in a really tough spot in their life and they're languishing, what can we tell them about how to turn it around, how to get started on turning it around?
I can only just give you my lived experience on this one. And it's controlling the controllables, because if you're focused on the outcomes you can't control, it's already hard enough. You're already going to be paralyzed to a certain degree. But the things that you can control are, number one, getting in the gym, getting in the best shape of your life. These are the things that I think kind of saved me. Is what I was auditing every day was not how terrible the experience was. It was, did I at least control the controllables? Did I go to the gym? Am I still meal prepping? Am I controlling what I can control? And if you judge yourself based on that, you can kind of stabilize. You're not going to make, when your life's crashing, it doesn't just go, oh, I can get out of it, and it just like turns. But at least you can stabilize. So you need to have small wins where you can control them, and then do damage control where you can't control the outcomes.
Love it. Love it. Jerry, how about you? If someone's in a bad situation, what can they do in the next 24 hours?
I mean, go to what can I count on, right? And that's, again, like Justin said, the gym. I mean, that's it for me. I mean, if I don't go to the gym, I mean, that's the beginning of, of a bad day potentially, okay, because I didn't do something that I know is good for me and I should do, and I have learned, and this is the hardest thing for everybody to do. The worst days, and by the way, everybody has these days. I don't care how successful you are. I don't care if you know people that look like, oh my God, how do they live that life? They have bad days, and if something negative happens, or you have some bad news or whatever it is, if you can discipline yourself to go to what you can count on regardless, and it's the old saying, do it anyways.
Yeah.
Then you're in the process of embracing the battle and getting through it. And whereas when you get out of your regiment, something bad happens and you say, oh, I'm not good, I'm just feel terrible about this or that, whatever. So I'm not going to the gym, or, I'm going to, go to McDonald's or whatever it might be, that will send you down a really negative path. So you got to find out what it is you can count on. And that's different for different people. I mean, Justin and I, we're workout fanatics, but I mean, some people could be, sitting down and reading a book. Some people like you, Russell, you're a musician, maybe you need to, get that guitar out, whatever it is, but you have to have a go-to in difficult times and be able to, discipline yourself to go to it. Yeah. I think that takes you pretty far.
I'm glad you said the book thing, because I really don't like reading books. I don't enjoy it. But in times of tragedy, making a couple phone calls, trying to make a buck is not going to move the needle. I think it's recognizing like what can help me right now, like what is most needed for this moment. And it's something like this book, Outwitting the Devil, right? Like I did not want to read this. I did not at all. But I forced myself to read it. I forced myself to go to the gym. Like these things that you just don't want to do, that are good for you, that don't cost investment, don't like in money and any of those things. Like that's actually the best use of your time in tragedy, because you just need a shift.
Ladies and gentlemen, adversity is coming your way, most likely. The down times are coming. They come to all of us. We have to learn how to deal with it and to be able to move past it. This book right here, Chapter 13, From Victim to Victor. It's an amazing chapter. If you don't have the book, I encourage you to get it. You're going to love it. It's a fantastic book. Jerry, the mantra today is the comeback is always greater than the setback. Is there any last words you'd like to share with us?
I just want everybody to understand that life is simply a game of odds and percentages, and the only way you can lose is if you stop playing the game.
Wow. Justin, you got any last words for us today?
Yeah. I mean, if you're the high achiever, don't make your identity so much about the balance sheet. I think, when you haven't had things before, like flying first class and like staying at the nicest resorts or whatever, that you want it so bad. And then when you lose it and you've been there and you go back, you realize that the view is just the same. The sand feels the same, and just give yourself the life experiences at whatever level you can and really enjoy it. And because you will have times where you can enjoy it at a higher level and enjoy it at a lower level. But if we're only going to enjoy our lives when we're on the top of the mountain, we're going to miss most of life.
Gentlemen, I want to thank both of you. Jerry, always amazing to get together with you for these conversations. I certainly hope the content that we share in these podcasts are helpful to people. I suspect they are. Justin, so good to have you today. You're an amazing young man. Can't wait to see where your life goes. I hope I can just be in that universe to just kind of experience it and see it, reach out and touch it every now and then. I know you're going to do amazing things. Gentlemen, I want to thank you both for today. Fantastic content. I look forward to catching up with you soon. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. We come out every 2 weeks with a new conversation. These conversations are intended to help you get where you want to go. We're not selling anything. We just want to help people get unstuck, get where they want to go, grow their lives, and be all they can be. Guys, thank you so much. Talk to you real soon.